Ethiopia, the greatest country in all of Africa. They have an amazing history, they've never been colonized, they have one of the fastest growing economies, they have amazing music and culture and blah 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 blah. Well, let me tell you, Ethiopia isn't everything they hype themselves up to be. You ever have that one neighbor that is always jealous of your yard, so they're always acting passive-aggressive towards you and always acting entitled? Well, I haven't. I live with my parents, so I don't really know the neighbors. But that's not important, because that is basically Ethiopia. Ethiopia yells at you for the noise being too loud, but only does so because they're secretly plugging their extension cord into your house for electricity, and you are using too much power.
So I put two and two together there, and decided that you're pissing me off.
Ethiopia has been this massive jerk to all of its neighboring countries, and we often see Ethiopia as the good one. Look at how good these human rights are. Look at you, dumpster fires. Did you hear about those Somali pirates? Why can't you be more like Ethiopia? But I'm here today to tell you that Ethiopia is not innocent. But before I begin, I need to clarify that this video is about the Ethiopian state and the government, as the people of Ethiopia really have no control over these issues and only want a peaceful resolution and a happy life. It got me thinking, don't you think it's odd that everything is controlled by such a small percentage of people? Or is that just me? Never mind. This is why Ethiopia is such a bad neighbor. Somalia's borders are messed up. You take this land that is very similar ethnic-wise, but is divided by many clans and families, and then colonize and divide the crap out of it. Today, the country is still divided with Somaliland, which was former British Somaliland. On the other hand, Ethiopia is super cool, because their borders are absolutely perfect, because through many tough battles, they were never fully colonized. It's because they're also colonizers. This region right here is known as Somali. It is full of Somalis. They have Somalian beliefs. It is part of Ethiopia. Why? It was conquered. No big deal. Starting the first century, something kind of light here. While Italy and Britain were fighting over the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia was making its own territorial claims to the region, but did lose out to the former colonizers. So it's time to decolonize, and get this. Not only is Somalia united with Somaliland, but also it's still divided with territory in Ethiopia and Kenya. Despite Somalia and Somaliland not getting along just yet, let's start uniting together to create a greater Somalia. This led to the Ogaden War, where Somalia decides to invade the Kenyan region of Somali, formerly known as Ogaden, to try to reclaim the land that Ethiopia took from them. Of course, this didn't end well for Somalia, with Ethiopia's army being much stronger. Well, how does Ethiopia keep control over a region that isn't ethnically Ethiopian? Well, by keeping things, let's just say, unstable. Ethiopia is pretty good at establishing cruel regimes. As in this article, we can see a complete plan of Ethiopia to establish themselves in Somali government, set up military, and cause conflict between the divided clans of the country by tickling them. This word here translates to the tickle. The tickle 7? Oh, it's the pain! They're dropping pains! So besides political involvement, they've caused instability in other ways. What do you get when you take an impoverished desert region with divided ethnicities and one side subjects them to a war and the other is trying to control them? That's right! Terrorism! Yay! Today, the relation between the two countries is better than ever, as they've been working together to fight off the terrorism that their actions totally sparked. These borders really aren't perfect, because they don't highlight the actual Ethiopian ethnicity. It's clearly not good enough for them either, as these colonizer tactics are being used to get them a sweet coastline. But Ethiopia already kinda has a coastline. Becoming a power isn't easy. Not every power gets to be really big, although most of them are. But not all of them get to have the best land, except for mostly all of them. Okay, well, becoming a power isn't fair, but it isn't easy either. Djibouti is a little baby country. But look, what if we put you right here? This sea right here is one of the most important in the entire world, and it's your coastline. Now go be rich! Dang, sorry about that. Let's repay it to you by putting in our military bases to keep you safe. Djibouti, despite its size, has multiple military bases from global powers. But Djibouti at least makes some good money off of that. Ethiopia is also trying to be its own regional power. But you know, they're chill with each other. Look at how good these human rights are. So Ethiopia is like, we're better than that. We don't need to cram some military base in there. That's a waste of time. We'll just have 70% of all business going through the port of Djibouti. This port is the majority of Djibouti's GDP, yet it's mostly run by Ethiopia. This is because all of Ethiopia's international trade is done through this port. So Djibouti kinda has to bend to some of Ethiopia's whims because they might go broke without them. And while the tensions between these two countries are the lightest in this video, it's important to recognize that this region of the world kind of has an Ethiopian monopoly. Djibouti could have been the Kuwait to Ethiopia's Iraq, yet it was never really given the chance to be the coastline hog it deserved to be. And some people might be thinking if we can really trust Ethiopia with this Middle Eastern coastline. Well... Oh, we aren't just talking about immediate neighbors, because Ethiopia stretches its big mountain energy all the way to the Middle East. This is the Great Renaissance Dam, a mega project that will become the largest hydroelectric producer in Africa. With only 47% of the population having access to electricity, the benefits of this dam will be revolutionary for the country, which is great news. But here's the catch. It's built around the source of the Blue Nile River. You know, the Nile River, the entire reason Egypt is functional at all. Ethiopia will be able to fully control the outflow of the Nile River, which means if Egypt wants to go against Ethiopia, no, too bad, no water. Egypt obviously isn't happy about that, considering that the Nile is where everyone lives and is the main contributor to it surviving at all. Egypt has made multiple threats to Ethiopia about destroying the dam, which is really scary. It doesn't help that Egypt has worse neighbors trying to see who can become the biggest influence in the Muslim Homeowners Association. But it's not too late for Egypt. Let's hope Egypt diversifies its economy so it isn't so dependent on the Nile River. Let's hope Egypt doesn't go build some vanity city that is way over budget, will never be built on time, has horrible urban planning, and won't bankrupt the country of all energy. This could spark one of the largest wars in African history. Hey, Sudan? You bored, guys? Civil war was a little too long ago? You have nothing, I don't know, better going on than to invade some random desert land? This is a contested region known as Al Fashaga. After multiple disputes, the territory was given to Sudan, but Ethiopian farmers were able to cultivate the land. But when the Ethiopian Civil War began, Sudan decides to send troops to take it back. Desert nations kinda love expanding their borders to claim the most useless of things. But Sudan actually has an excuse because this loss of land here seems to contain every blade of grass in the former country. So yeah, Sudan is at fault here, even though I'm neutral on the actual debate on who should own the land. This neighborhood kinda sucks. But did I mention they are also dependent on the Nile and the dam is controlling them? They also have a lot less resources than Egypt, so you know. I don't actually hate this dam. I'm glad the Ethiopian citizens will have a lot more wealth and resources, and I want things to be better. One of my favorite things about studying Africa is seeing the cool developments countries make to develop their country, especially in East Africa. But you can't ignore Ethiopia is fully aware of the power and control they'll have and the tensions they are continuing to stoke. Now, while writing, I hear that Sudan is now in agreement about the dam, trusting Ethiopia won't cause any damage to Sudan despite their war they're in. But hey, Ethiopia's not one to betray agreements, right? It's 1941, and Eritrea is currently being occupied by the British. They are not considered UK citizens and have very little rights. That's not fair, says Ethiopia. Yeah, you're right, guys. They deserve freedom. What? No. It's not fair they get all these nice schools and buildings and wealth from the British. We don't get that. Please, don't do what I think you're about to do. You already got Somali. Let us have it. Of course. 2 states, equal power. Okay, enough of that. Let's strip away all their rights. Eritrea is now just a state of Ethiopia, and all the culture and wealth and what little freedom they had is being taken away. Eritrea and Ethiopia have been divided for a long time due to a complex history of religious tensions. We want rights.
Wish for something else!
Freedom.
Wish for something else!
War.
Granted! Ha! Bye!
This led to a brutal war for independence that lasted over 30 years. You just know you're a cool country when you have to conquer countries doing better than you. You may have noticed that every country so far is a more harsh dictatorship than Ethiopia. See, the US is stupid. They target countries that don't align with their more progressive values, which is really not a good way of doing business. And Ethiopia is smart. Instead of doing all that, let's just make everyone stoop to our level. It's so much easier. When this war was over, Eritrea was left with nothing but remains and civilians born and raised in war with no sense on running a country, just like Ethiopia intended. Eritrea has become debatably the worst dictatorship in Africa. Access to the internet is restricted or straight up forbidden, journalists are brutally punished, military service is mandatory, and thousands are fleeing the country regularly. Eritrea is commonly referred to as the North Korea of Africa. And just like North Korea, when you cross that border, you are greeted with a much more beautiful and free country. Yeah, no. Ethiopia gets to seem like such a great place because of the damage it did to Eritrea. This is how Ethiopia gets you. Oh, it's so hard to be a superpower. Couldn't you just die? Eritrea, because of this war-bred society, started fighting with Ethiopia again over border disputes, and were going on until as recently as 2020, and is now just a horrible dictatorship that thousands are fleeing from annually. Eritrea might just be the most screwed over nation by Ethiopia if it wasn't for... This is the northern region of Ethiopia, known as Tigray, and it's the political powerhouse of the country, who has a major role in determining politics and leaders. But in 2018, after a mostly rigged election, as most of them are, people actually ousted them and elected a prime minister more representative of the rest of the country, Abiy Ahmed. Obviously the Tigrayans were very upset, but they lost and they mostly dealt with it. But they kept a close eye on Ahmed to make sure he was still aligning with their values. They still had a lot of influence in the country. But look, this guy was responsible for establishing peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia. I bet that's a good sign. Because of this, he won a Nobel Peace Prize. Now I bet that's a good sign. 2 years later, it's time for another election, and if you think the US 2020 election was bad, just listen. One thing you need to know about dictators is that they're really stupid. Do you have a dictator? I bet they're stupid. So your priority is to get reelected, yet you're not really popular with everybody. So what do? Do you A, create positive growth and change in your country to improve your citizens' way of life, or B, don't let the people vote at all? So the answer is obviously B, but remember, you're a dictator and you're really, really stupid. So what's the stupidest way we can get people not to vote? Blame it on COVID. He told the Tigrayans that because of COVID threats, their vote was delayed and then just went by the results that were on time, and of course only did this to the one region so they would obviously find out, and oh my god! This has led to the current Ethiopia civil war, and this is by far the bloodiest war going on. There have been more casualties than any conflicts going on right now, caused by either violence or famine. More than in Syria, more than in Ukraine, and it's only counting the results that are being disclosed, and most of the statistics are hidden. Thousands have become refugees in Sudan, which adds to that conflict. Both sides have been caught committing war crimes, and it is by far the most unsafe part of the world right now. Remember that good sign from earlier? Eritrea only knows war, and it's at their border yet again, so now the two countries have actually united in committing war crimes. They have also recently had a ceasefire, which you would think is good news, but no, because now the state of Oromia has been having escalating violence as the unique Oromo people have been mistreated by the government for a long time as they did not align with the Orthodox Church. Oh, and Eritrea hasn't obliged by the ceasefire and are still occupying because nothing good is ever allowed to happen ever. The capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, is centered in the Oromo region, which is really scary considering the current conflict going on. And hold on. You have a war in Tigray that's being fought in the Amhara and Afar regions. Oromia is in conflict. Eastern Somalia is still in conflict. That's the whole country! Invaded Somali lands, war with Sudan, war with Egypt, conflict with every superpower at the Red Sea, Eritrea's existence, and they're killing their own men! Ethiopia, what did you do? Why have you done this? Ethiopia is the superpower of Africa? No. It's over. No amount of unique culture, history, geography, economy can deny that Ethiopia has been one of the worst neighbors in modern history, and it is so over. But it isn't too late to help out. There are many charities out there that are fighting to combat famine and help struggling families involved in this war. I most recommend the Tigray Youth Network, which is the largest organization solely dedicated to helping the complete damage and destruction of the region. I will leave a link to them in the description. I can't say a charity is going to help the burned bridges we've talked about today, but bad neighbors aside, I think it's very important to help the many of whom are suffering and never had anything to do with these conflicts. At the end of the day, if you have bad neighbors, it's not really the children's fault. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something with me today. I'd like to make this a potential series of places around the world that have seriously wronged their neighbors. And hopefully, starting with Ethiopia, my social credit won't disappear so quickly. That is all for now, and thank you for watching.